With the popular growth of board games amongst royalty, they quickly became adopted by the working class. And soon after, they became tied into religious beliefs. As you can sort of see from our previous discussion, if you think that you're lucky at games and that means that you're protected by the gods, it's not a sort of far step to thinking that board games have something to do with religion. And so, in particular, the game pictured here, Mehen, was connected to the gods. And while a complete set of rules, again, is not available to this game, we do know that the game represents the deity Mehen that it was named for. The sun cult envisioned the god as a huge serpent who wrapped itself around the sun god Re in its coils. And so you can see kind of how the coils of the snake are depicted in the board game here. At some point, the game and the god became intertwined, and it became sort of synonymous with the serpent deity in text and thought. Tim Kendall, who's an ancient Egyptian historian, believed it wasn't really possible to know, based on what evidence that we have right now, whether the deity was inspired by the snake game or the snake game was sort of dedicated to the god. We can't really tell which came which, or at least which came first. Most people think of backgammon as a game that has been played sort of the longest of all board games, but actually it's the royal game of and so that's the game that's pictured here. The game had been thought long dead and superseded by backgammon sort of 20,000 years ago. However, a game enthusiast, Irving Finkel, discovered that the game's rules were actually carved into an ancient stone tablet. And he then spotted a photograph of an identical board game from modern India. Soon after, Finkel met a retired school teacher who had played the game as a kid. And so that made it clear that there sort of had been continuous gameplay of the royal game of and so that makes it sort of the longest played game in history. The game gets its name from the founding within the royal tombs of in Iraq. And there was also a set found in Pharaoh Tutankhamun's tomb. The royal game of was played with two sets, one black and one white, and 7 markers and 3 four-sided or tetrahedral die. So I'm going to try to say this. Ludus Diodician Scriptorium was a board game popular during the time of the Roman Emperor, and the name translates as Game of 12 Markings. This likely referred to the 3 rows of 12 markings that are found on surviving game boards. The game Tabula is thought of to be a descendant of this game, and both are very similar to modern backgammon. This is a scripta board in the Museum of Ephesus. The oldest game with rules known to be nearly identical to backgammon described it as a board with the same 24 points and 12 on each side. As today, each player had 15 checkers and used a 6-sided die, and the object of the game was to be the first to bear off all of one's checkers. That's also the same. The only big difference with modern backgammon was the use of an extra die, so they had 3 instead of 2, and the starting of all of the pieces on the board entered in modern backgammon. The popularity of backgammon actually surged in the 1960s, in part due to the charisma of Prince Alexis Oblensky, who became known as the father of modern backgammon, and he co-founded the International Backgammon Association, which published an official set of rules and established the World Backgammon Club of Manhattan, which devised a backgammon tournament system in 1963. He later organized the first major international backgammon tournament in March of 1964, which attracted royalty, celebrities, and the press. And that's the second time, for those keeping track, that we've had royalty connected to our board games. I didn't realize that would be such a theme when I started to research this. So backgammon did become a huge fad and was played on college campuses and discotheques and country clubs all across the US. People young and old across this country dusted off their boards and checkers, and cigarette and liquor and car companies began to sponsor the tournaments, and Hugh Hefner even held a backgammon tournament at the Playboy Mansion. So and that all led to sort of a world championship of backgammon, which was in Las Vegas in 1967. So recently, the United States Backgammon Federation has organized in 2009 to kind of repopularize the game again, and especially in the United States. And board and community members include many of those top players and writers in the backgammon community.